Good morning. We'll call our meeting to order. First item we have is bill introductions. I have a bill. It's 23 RS 1523 concerning cities and counties relating to grants. And without objection, I'll introduce that. No, everybody okay? Without objection, it's accepted. Committee also, we have approval for minutes of March 21, 23, 28, and 29. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of the minutes.
I have a motion, second by Senator Fagg. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We'll now open our hearing on Senate Bill 152 concerning the salaries of the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, state treasurer, commissioners of insurance, justices of the Supreme Court, judges of the courts of appeals, and members of the governor's cabinet, establishing the rate of pay for such state offices based on the annual rate of pay for members of Congress and adjusted by the specific provisions of this act, and providing that all such rates of pay are subject to appropriations. With that, we'll have an overview from David Weiss, Officer Reviser of Statute. Thank you, David. Welcome, committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. Senate Bill 152 would add a couple new sections of law that provide that on July 1st of 2023 and each July 1 thereafter, the governor and the attorney general would receive an annual salary equal to the amount of the annual rate of pay for a member of the United States Congress, not in a leadership role, on such date, plus 10% of that congressional annual rate of pay. For information purposes, the current salary of a member of Congress, not in a leadership role, is currently $174,000. And then on July 1 of 2023 and each July 1 thereafter, the Secretary of State, State Treasurer, Commissioner of Insurance, Justices of the Supreme Court, and judges of the Court of Appeals would receive an annual salary equal to the amount of the annual rate of pay for a member of Congress on such date, except that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals would also receive an additional 2.5% of that congressional rate of pay on top of that. If for any reason the congressional salary is decreased, the salaries established by this bill would remain in effect for the next ensuing fiscal year, unless diminished by general law applicable to all salaried officers of the state. New Section 2 of the bill provides that on July 1 of 23 and each July 1 thereafter, the minimum amount of salary, annual salary for the members of the governor's cabinet would be equal to the annual rate of pay for a member of Congress, not in a leadership role, on such date, minus 10% of that rate of pay. And then for purposes of the section, the members of the governor's cabinet would be determined by the governor. And then all rates of pay in sections 1 and 2 are always subject to appropriation. So the money would have to be there to pay the salaries through the appropriations process. The bill also amends KSA 753103. This is the statute concerning the lieutenant governor's pay, and provides that the lieutenant governor would receive an annual salary equal to 1/2 the salary of a member of Congress, not in a leadership role. Senate Bill 152 also then goes into the existing statutes to strike any specific references to compensation or salary amounts in those now as they're being replaced by sections 1 or 2 of the bill. And then the bill becomes effective upon publication in the Register, and I can stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. Questions? Senator Petty.
And maybe this will come forward from testimony, but do we have a comparison, any kind of visual of current salary of our governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and Congress?
David?
I do not have any comparison or any charts like that. I don't know if the Comfreys might be able to speak to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's on the back page, so. VAT and profits.
Yeah, I believe the fiscal note does address some of those things. Some of the different.
Other questions for David? Seeing none, thank you, David. We will now have proponents, and we have John Jurgensen, Special Counsel for the Chief Justice. Sean, welcome, committee.
Good morning. Chairman Billinger, members of the committee, good morning. It's good to see you. I'm Sean Jurgensen, and I represent the judicial branch. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of Senate Bill 152. Like the revisor just mentioned, it does two things. It codifies a formula addressing statewide elected official pay and the pay of appellate judges. And I would like to focus on the latter of those two. As many of you know, the Kansas court system has struggled for years to attract the number of well-qualified private sector attorneys that it needs to maintain a professionally diverse bench. Attorneys come from all practice areas, and lately, quite a few of the attorneys who raised their hand for judge positions have come from the public sector, primarily prosecutors and public defenders. And while those attorneys can make excellent judges, Kansans and the businesses that they run deserve a professionally diverse bench and judges who have represented large and small corporations. They've represented Main Street, or farmers and ranchers, or individuals across the table that have faced a wide array of legal issues. Senator McGinn and President Masterson, Senator Fagg, Senator Kirshen, you walk into a courtroom in Sedgwick County or Butler County's courthouse, and you will likely have a trial or an evidentiary hearing that's ongoing that affects our aerospace manufacturing, our business developments, our industrial complexes in one of your two counties. And they're relying on the Kansas court system to enforce their contractual rights or protect their production interests. The same is true in Saline County with the interstate transportation industry that we have there, as well as the financial industry we have there. In the Kansas City metro area, with our growing business interests, it's going to rely upon a professionally diverse bench more. And Mr. Chair, in far western Kansas, with our oil and gas litigation, those leases interpreted in Kansas courts will set regional precedent that oil and gas producers will rely upon potentially for generations, affecting property rights. And it's these professionally diverse business interests that your Kansas courts must attract attorneys to the bench to handle. But the attorneys who have this experience, those who practice largely in the private sector, command salaries that far outpace what Kansas can offer. Anymore, even public sector attorneys can command more than what Kansas judges can, that we can offer Kansas judges to take the bench. In Kansas City, law firms now are offering first-year associates $170,000 a year. And these brand new associates on their first day practicing law will make more money than the judges before whom they appear. But by law, there is a statute that does not allow an attorney to become a judge until they have 5 years' experience. So over the course of that 5 years, as that attorney's book of business grows, and correspondingly their salary increases, it becomes even more difficult for your Kansas judiciary to attract those attorneys to the bench. Yet, as a community of Kansans, it is these attorneys that we need to best run our Republican form of government. At the beginning of my testimony, I mentioned that I was going to focus on the judicial portions of Senate Bill 152, and I want to draw your attention to a draft balloon that I've attached to my written testimony. We respectfully request that this committee consider and favorably adopt this balloon, which would codify a judicial pay formula, not just for the appellate judges that are currently in Senate Bill 152, but all classes of Kansas judges within the judiciary, from magistrates through the Supreme Court. Now, before you panic, we are not asking that you match what the private sector pays attorneys so that we can attract those attorneys to the bench. Much like Chief Justice Luker mentioned in her budget testimony earlier this year, instead, we're asking for a formula that's much more affordable to Kansas taxpayers, one that would set judge pay at a fraction of a federal judge's pay. It's the same marketplace for legal talent. The federal bench is seeking to recruit the exact same attorneys that we are seeking to attract to your Kansas bench. And so it makes sense for us, instead of being tied to congressional pay, the market's different for attorneys. So it makes more sense, in our opinion, to tie it to federal pay. And in that balloon, it also accounts, by and large, for the compression issues that these past few years Chief Justice Luker and I have visited with you, your colleagues, and legislative leadership about. And so when you review the balloon, as has been the case for over a decade, and certainly as long as I've been lucky enough to do this, We continue to use district court judge pay as the lodestar. And so when you see in that balloon, it will set district court judge pay as a fraction of a federal district court judge's pay. And then from there, by and large, the balloon essentially mirrors the budget request we submitted back in April, adopting the current pay structure that the legislature has established for judges in Kansas. But it does account for those legacy compression issues that I just mentioned. And so there are some individual variances there, but by and large, it resembles it, but it does account for those differences. And so this balloon would address the competitive salaries that we have sought to achieve by codifying it in law. And then we again respectfully request the committee to favorably adopt this balloon. And Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Sean. Questions? Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sean, for being here. That was excellent testimony, very concise, and came with a solution, not just a request, and I really do appreciate that. What is the federal judge pay now as for reference so that we have an idea what that number looks like?
So a federal district court judge, their pay is $232,600 this year, but we're not asking for that. We're instead asking for a fraction of that. We've asked in the balloon that a Kansas district court judge pay be set at 75% of that, which would be $174,450.
Equivalent to the congressional pay that's suggested in the bill almost. Huh? Thank you. Perfect.
Right, yeah, so it's just a fraction of that, and then all of our other classes are staggered from there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Senator Petty.
Actually, mine was the same question.
Okay. Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. What's the, how did you arrive at the difference between 1 and 2, 75% and 55%?
So by and large, so under A1, we set 75% of a federal district court judge's pay because we wanted it to resemble our budget request that we submitted back in September. We have always asked the legislature to bring judge pay to market, and when we submitted our budget, we wanted to be as transparent as possible. And so when we sought to codify this, we wanted it to largely mirror what we asked for in our budget request already, so that you didn't feel like we're trying to pull a quick one on you, frankly. And so because that is the percentage figure that gets closest to what our budget request was already, that's how we landed at 75%. And as far as the 55% for a district magistrate judge pay, that largely resembles the historical break between what a district court judge in Kansas makes and a district magistrate judge makes, historically, that the legislature has used.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As time goes on, is that separating on percentages? I'm questioning whether they should be close.
Actually, if you look at it since fiscal year 1982, that percentage difference has actually shrunk. Beginning in fiscal year 1982, magistrate judges only made 40-some percent, 43%, I believe, don't quote me. And over the course of time, that's grown, and now it's above 50.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what would the average district magistrate judge
Today, or after this is codified? Yeah, certainly. So today, district magistrate judges make $76,601, and if this were codified, it would move magistrate judges to $95,900.
Any other questions? Seeing none? Oh, Senator Clays.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that, on magistrate judges, that's a pretty significant increase. Can you tell us a little bit more about, like, are there a lot of vacancies? What's going on with that?
Yeah, we continue to struggle to recruit magistrates, and so magistrates are uniquely situated in that when you discuss pay equity, there's a number of factors that we have to look at. And recently, we've had magistrate positions that have drawn 0 applicants, even though that position only requires a high school diploma, frankly, as its educational floor. And so knowing that and the marketplace that we're in, we can't attract individuals to the bench who are magistrate judges. So we've struggled recently attracting them to the bench. But this is also one of the classes of judges that I mentioned that we're trying to fix some compression issues on. And so that is one of the classes of judges that have had to move up, because as you see, this would move them from 51% where they're currently at as compared to a district court judge's salary to 55 to help account for that.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you look at the district judge, can you tell me before and after on those numbers for the average district judge?
Yeah, so presently, district judges make 148.9, and after codified, it would move it to 174,450, which is again the 75% mark of a federal district judge. Yet, at the same time, is still only about $5,000 more than than first-year associates can draw at some law firms. So but nevertheless, we think that this is what we believe will bring us to market to attract the judges we need.
Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we're kicking out numbers, so what's your chief thing? Because 125% of 75% is not as much as the original 100%. So what was that, about 93% or so, 94? What's your top salary?
For the Chief Justice, it would move it to 218.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has there ever been any discussion on the magistrate judge, whether you have a degree or not? You talked about the high school education versus, should there be any difference in that type of thing?
Yeah, so that's actually set in statute, and it's been a legislative policy for years, the educational floor that magistrates are required to have to take the bench. And so there has been conversation about that a couple of times in the years I've done this, but nothing very serious. And when you are looking at the pay differentials between a magistrate judge and a district court judge, magistrate judges are the only class of judges that we have that the legislature permits to receive a supplement from their county. So there are some counties in Kansas that actually pay an additional amount of money to their magistrates on top of what the state pays, because the legislature's allowed that. And magistrates sometimes operate as municipal court judges. They have other second jobs that district court judges are prohibited from having. And so this isn't their only source of income. And those are the kind of the other pay equity factors that you necessarily have to weigh when it comes to magistrates.
Senator Pittman.
Thank you. So not to anchor the committee, but the pretty significant pay increase is what we're talking about. It's a really good structure, I think. Given that we're looking at 75% of the federal judge, what's the percentage of a federal judge that lodestar, the district judge, what's their percentage now? Is it like 65% of a federal judge right now, their current salary?
Well, what it would be,
roughly?
I'd have to do the math.
So as an example, you said 174, 75%, what are they making now?
Yeah, I'd have to do the math.
What's their salaries now?
Their salary right now is 148.9.
So 148.9. And so
of 232. I went to law school because I didn't have to do math there. We got to stick to English. Is it 65%?
real close.
Someone's giving me an assist.
That's close enough.
somewhere in between.
And largely, we have to look at, we're correcting a legacy issue that's affected the branch for decades. And I know that none of us were here during that period of time, but there was a very long period of time where pay stagnated. And we're having to correct that over the course of years, and this would do it.
But if we wanted to set something at a floor of 65 and at a request of 75, there might be a number in there that we might consider just to set the pay structure that would increase consistently over time with the federal judge.
Yeah, I mean, candidly, if we would just simply codify it at this rate, it would stay there.
At
It would allow us to maintain the same market.
Or at 70, potentially. I mean,
theoretically.
Thanks.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I sit here and look at these numbers, I'm thinking you're standing before a group that gets paid $88 a day.
No.
And my question to that would be, doesn't the judges, isn't service part of what they do? That's my question.
Certainly, and I have maintained for years that you need to increase the $88 a day. You don't get the compensation that's commensurate with the amount of time and investment that's required of you and your family. And when I sit back and I reflect on the amount of time that each of you spend away from your family to do this so that you can come here and enact policy and turn it into law, that's an incredible investment that each of you are making. And then at the end of the day, every time we get one of those new session laws books delivered to all of our judges across the state, and they're the ones tasked with interpreting and applying the law that you've spent so much time away from your family to enact, I want to give you the best attorneys we can possibly get to do that for you. And so, and it is a public service, but anymore, we find that the gap in pay is so great that, while everyone expects to take a pay cut when they become a public servant, that gap in pay has become so great that we're failing to attract the attorneys that we need. And so trying to correct that, and that's why we're not asking for you to match private sector salaries or even some federal, legal salaries. We're just asking for a fraction of it because we believe that that would be what it takes to get to market rate.
Any other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up on that, I thought your testimony was impactful about the fact that, of course, as you just said, those laws that we pass and put in place, then our legal court system has to enforce them. And this is what citizens of Kansas come in contact with. And at the same time, we have put in place requirements for, as you just mentioned, having to have 5 years of experience to even be considered for a district judge. So we do have control over those decisions about who moves into who could even run for or move into those positions. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm, correct. There's a statutory requirement for eligibility to be a district court judge. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Sean. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Are there any other proponents that are not listed? Seeing none, we'll move on to opponents. Are there any opponents? Seeing none, we'll move on to neutral. Committee, Will Lawrence, Chief of Staff of the Governor, has written only. It's in your packet. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Pittman?
I'll just put out on the mic for anybody listening that Will Lawrence's letter basically says, whether we do this or not, keep in mind that the Attorney General has typically had a lower salary than the governor historically, and he urges us to consider that if we pass this law. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, we'll close our hearing on Senate Bill 152. And with that, we are adjourned. Senator Masterson.
Mr. Chairman, were we going to have a review? I anticipated we were going to go over what the House did on salaries. I was anticipating we would get some type of update on.
I didn't do that.
Well, we'll authorize you for another meeting. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, no one had said anything to me, so I failed to do that. With that, we are adjourned.